We are going to begin the funeral service for Mr. Robert M. Seeley. If you have a cell phone, I'd ask you to place it into silent mode or turn it completely off at this time. I'd also like to welcome anybody via live stream. On behalf of the family, thank you for attending as well. And services will be conducted by Rabbi Adam Shalom.
Today we stand at the end of an era. It has been 97 years since there was a world without a Bob Seeley in it. It's a world we're not familiar with. Even if his active presence faded over the last few years, the impact on his family of his personality, his loving support and encouragement, his strong opinions, and his impact on his community and his network of social contacts and work connections, all of these continued as they continue even now that he is gone. Whether or not this life is all there is a natural immortality in the human experience. The ideas that we share, the causes we support, the memories we leave with others, these live on, and we live on in those even after we have shuffled off this mortal coil. I'd like to begin this memorial service for Bob Seeley. I never heard him call himself Robert in my time knowing him, so I'll stick to Bob. I'd like to begin this memorial service for Bob Seeley with a poem by the Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai called A Song of Praise, Shir Hallel, which I'll read in Hebrew and in English. אני רוצה לשיר שיר הלל לכל מה שנשאר פה איתנו, ולא עוזב ולא נודד כציפורי הנדוד, ולא בורח צפונה ולא דרומה, ולא שר ליבי במזרח ואנוכי בקצה מערב. אני רוצה לשיר לעצים שאינם משליכים את עליהם, וסובלים להט קיץ וקור חורף, ולבני אדם שאינם משליכים את זיכרונותיהם, וסובלים יותר מבני אדם שמשליכים הכל. אבל מעל הכל, אני רוצה לשיר שיר הלל לאוהבים, שנשארים יחדיו לשמחה ולצער ולשמחה, לעשות בית, לעשות ילדים, עכשיו ובעונות האחרות. I want to sing a song of praise to all that remains here with us and does not leave, and does not wander like the migrating birds, and does not flee to the north and not to the south, and does not sing, my heart is in the east, but I am at the edge of the west. I want to sing to the trees that do not throw out their leaves, and withstand the blaze of summer and the cold of winter, and to those people who do not throw out their memories, and withstand more than those people who throw out everything. But above all, I want to sing a song of praise to lovers who remain together for joy and for pain and for joy, to make a home, to make children, now and in the other seasons. I need to confess something about the rabbinic profession. We do not always know personally those people whose eulogies we deliver. We listen carefully to the families, and we hear them share their memories of their loved one, and then we share them back, as I will today. But the true personality remains somewhat obscured. By contrast, I had the pleasure of knowing Bob as a member of my congregation for many years, and my predecessor, our Rabbi Emeritus Daniel Friedman, knew Bob as a congregant for almost 40 years. When I told Rabbi Friedman that Bob had died, he wrote a note to me that I'd like to share with you. Bob Seeley was my good and treasured friend, and he was the perfect congregant. He hosted me for countless lunches, kept our conversations going at a very high level about the current political controversy or religious issue, and most importantly, he always agreed with me. That's saying something, because he did not suffer fools gladly, or at all. The story is that during the early days of our congregation, when he was the president, he would bring an egg timer to board meetings. When a board member would exceed the Seeley-imposed 3-minute speaking limit, he would lift the timer and announce, "Time's up," and call on the next speaker. Bob loved movies, especially the little-known Buñuel masterpieces or an obscure American Western classic. And when I went away on sabbatical leave, he agreed to take over and conduct a series of movie discussions that engaged and enlightened his fellow congregants as only he could with his wealth of cinema knowledge. Whenever I open the Criterion movie app and choose a vintage film, I wonder if Bob would have recommended it, or the novel I'm reading. He's the only person I've known to be reading Trollope. I miss those lunches with Bob, but the good memories of this fine friend linger on. I, too, as Bob's rabbi, had the pleasure of a rabbinic lunch at many fine restaurants in our area. Lovell's in Lake Forest, Bobby's in Deerfield, Bluegrass in Highland Park. I only made the mistake of riding in his car as a passenger once. We had our debates. He very rarely agreed with me. But I appreciated that he always thought through his position. He was willing to debate other perspectives with force as long as you could handle his withering snark. And he happily handed off his commentary magazines to me for many years, hoping to change my mind as his had been changed. He always provoked thought, whether or not I changed my mind. He shared an aphorism attributed to Churchill, which his family also shared to me. If you are young and conservative, you have no heart. If you are old and liberal, you have no brain. I did a little bit of research. It turns out the International Churchill Society has declared the attribution is false. It was not Churchill who said it. Whatever you think of the truth of the statement. As his family also told me, if you could prove him wrong, he would smile and say, "So I'm wrong." Bob could be a bit of a cranky curmudgeon, an intellectual provocateur, but he was also generous in supporting the causes and the people he valued. He was someone who valued intelligence, culture, beauty, fine food, the good experiences in life. And so I know just a little of what the extended Seeley family have lost in my own way. And as a tribute to Bob, the tie I chose this morning is the only one I own. I bought many, many years ago from the Donald J. Trump signature collection. As I said, Bob loves beauty. And so I want to also begin this service with a short selection from Beethoven's Symphony No. 7, chosen by his daughter, Karen. It's just 90 seconds of beauty from a beautiful symphony that Bob loved by Beethoven, his No. 7th. To borrow from Saul Bellows' The Adventures of Augie March, Bob was an American, Chicago-born. His father, Joseph, came from Bremen, Germany, in 1909 with his own mother and sister. They were originally from a shtetl near Kiev. The name Seeley maybe have been Selinski at some point, we don't really know. On the other side, Bob's mother, Dorothy, who was Dora on her immigration documents, came from Eastern Europe to London first, where her last name became Jenkins, and then on to Chicago with both parents and 3 sisters. Bob's parents married in January 1926, and he was born on October 7th that same year. 18 months later, his brother Leonard, or Lenny, arrived. The family lived in various Jewish neighborhoods on the north side of Chicago, including Albany Park. Joseph had worked at a packing plant and then left to form a meat brokerage firm. He got Bob his first job with Eddie Hess and Ray Stevenson, a firm that Bob eventually took over with 2 partners, even though they kept the established name of Hess Stevenson. The firm was initially on LaSalle Street and then Monroe. In the firm, there were cattle guys and pork guys. Bob was one of the pork guys, and so clients would often send him ham or bacon as thank yous. If you'd known Bob only at work, and his daughters occasionally experienced him there visiting, you would have thought he was always kind and nice and funny, a born salesman who insisted that they knock off the swearing and dirty jokes when the girls were there. And he was very successful at his chosen profession. Now, you might also be confused by a professional meat broker specializing in pork having good personal relationships with 2 rabbis over 50 years. First, we're not that kind of rabbi. And second, Bob's commitment to being Jewish was firm and deep, even though it had nothing to do with what he ate or what he wore or what he said. Bob had a bar mitzvah as a boy. In fact, Paul showed me the watch he received as a gift that Paul had restored from that event. And even though in 1959 he and Eileen moved with a growing family to the uncharted wilderness known as Deerfield, and they had to help start their own temple there, which was Congregation Bethor in 1960, Bob played an active role in that community. As was mentioned, he was a president there. In the early days before a building, when the congregation rented space from a Unitarian church, Bob would schlep the ark in pieces and help assemble it, and he also helped cover the cross on the church when they held their Jewish services. If his kids dated, he wanted to know their date's last name and whether they were Jewish. In 1965, Bob also helped Congregation Bethor move on from their initial rabbi, Rabbi Stern, whom Bob said was very appropriately named for his personality, to Rabbi Daniel Friedman, who would be the rabbi there for the next 35 years. With Rabbi Friedman, the congregation built its building on Deerfield Road and shifted along with the rabbi from Reform Judaism to Humanistic Judaism, a shift that Bob found fascinating, and he always had a deep intellectual kinship with Rabbi Friedman in many ways. Bob's thought evolved politically as well as religiously, even though he tended to vote for the Jewish candidate if there was one running. In fact, the only reason he voted for Al Gore for president in 2000 was his Jewish running mate, Joseph Lieberman. Bob started on the far left. He was the president of the University of Chicago Socialism Society. He voted for Eugene McCarthy. He smoked pot. He even wore a Nehru jacket until someone called him father, thinking he was a priest, and that was the end of that jacket. When Deerfield was considering an integrated housing development, shortly after he moved there, he signed a petition in favor. As Bob evolved politically through his life, he claimed to have never voted for a losing presidential candidate until Al Gore, in his evolution from LBJ liberal to Reagan conservative, and even beyond into the 2000s. William F. Buckley's National Review said that a conservative is someone who stands athwart history, yelling, "Stop!" The assumption is that what is there for a reason, and shouldn't be changed without good cause. Even if Bob changed over his lifetime, there were some good things about him that never changed. One thing that never changed about Bob was his love of gadgets. He had a gas-powered bicycle and then a motorcycle for a time, trying them out. He went to a special garage in Chicago to have an FM radio tuner installed under his dashboard when those were brand new. And he was one of the first people to get a DVR. He especially loved fast and powerful cars, even if he seemed unable to drive them without incidents. Bob's first date with Eileen, he picked her up in a car, which was exciting. except the passenger door was so dented she had to climb in through the driver's side door to get to her seat. He would sometimes ask the policeman who pulled him over, "Officer, can't we settle this somehow?" Occasionally, boxes of meat would find their way to the officer. He was always going to traffic school, didn't seem to help. He smashed up his brother Lenny's new car. He had lots of car accidents in lots of exotic locations on their travels, or sometimes in his own driveway. Once he had 2 accidents in one incident, with his grandchildren Leah and Sean in the back seat. First, he accidentally closed the garage door and smashed the back window all over them. And then, as he was finishing backing the car out, he left his door open and took that off too. Another thing that never changed about Bob were passions for the life of the mind and the life of the spirit, learning and culture. We heard about his love of movies, both domestic and foreign. He even worked movies into his Sunday school curriculum when he taught at Congregation Beth Or. Bob always loved music. He took his children to see the Beatles in 1966 in the 12th row. The seats cost $10 each from a scalper. He had lots of folk music, pre-conservatism. He loved march music. He loved classical music. They had hundreds of music CDs at home. He even liked singing his old fraternity songs from his time in college at the University of Chicago, where he got both undergraduate and graduate degrees. During World War II, his asthma had him at draft status 4F, though he claimed that was his secret to getting into the University of Chicago in the first place. Everyone else was in the Army, and so he was able to get in. He was never into playing sports. He told his children he did not care if they flunked gym. It did not matter to him. Though he did jog for a time and played tennis for a time, and he was always up early doing his military calisthenics as part of his personal discipline. He was a very disciplined person. He did enjoy watching his television. Fox News, yes, but also movies and Chicago sporting events, especially Cubs baseball, but also at times the White Sox if they were winning, according to Warren. He read and he thought. He collected first editions of special books, and he actually read them too. One of his grandchildren thought he could have been a writer in a different life. He always had a wonderful way of expressing himself and wrote a great letter to the editor. And he did it all with gusto. Because Eileen was a travel agent, they were able to travel the world, be it visiting Karen when she was in Europe or going to their favorite places. Rome was one of his, and eating amazing food. But even if he made something himself at home, he was convinced that it was the best. I once asked him, after all of his travels, where in the world would he like to be? And his answer was, Deerfield, Illinois, and especially his beloved home at 540 Carriage Way. Not just for the house, but especially for the family memories. I was told that instead of buying a vacation home in Florida, he and Eileen chose to remodel that home to host their family for special events and holidays, like their annual Thanksgiving gathering. You see, the most important thing that never changed about Bob was his attachment to family. Bob's parents lived near his young family when they were still in Chicago. Almost every week, his and Eileen's parents would visit with candy for the kids, a large part of their childhood. And when Bob's father died, Bob said he brought a little bit of sunshine into everyone's life. Turns out Joseph would sing "You Are My Sunshine," a song that Bob remembered even near the end when other music had been forgotten. Bob's own nuclear family started with his life partner, Eileen, to whom he was married for 75 years. Eileen was in the same high school class as Bob's brother, Lenny. She was 19 when they met, 20 when they married, and Bob was 22. They wanted 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and that's exactly what they got. First Paul, and then 2 years later Karen, then 2 years later Warren, and 2 years later Ellen. Bob never stopped talking about how beautiful Eileen was and how much he loved her. She was the best mother. Marrying her was the best decision he ever made. Even in later years, he was very focused on her. He always wanted her sitting on the couch next to him. She would make dinner just about every night, and Bob would want to eat with her. He would say, "Honey, will you sit down?" A song of praise to those who make a home and make children, now and in the other seasons. As the family grew beyond their home, Bob and Eileen's hearts were always big enough to include everyone. The people who married his children, Iris and Brinkley and Karen and John, became part of that wide embrace, those large gatherings in his family room, the audience for his stories and pronouncements, sometimes the target for a spirited argument. John remembers that when he and Ellen told Bob and Eileen they were moving in together with the ultimate plan of marriage, she was aghast, but he was thrilled. He wanted to see the people he loved happy, including finding someone who made them happy. The Bob I personally experienced as the cranky curmudgeon, well, that could be a part of family life too. When I asked his grandchildren to share their memories, I heard the story of Leah and Sean in the back seat with the smashed window. Also, Ariel remembering that Bob once called into the NPR show Car Talk, a show that he enjoyed. The question was an argument between Bob and Eileen over whether you need to use your blinker in a designated turn lane. Their response on the radio show was, "Too much can't hurt, and if it keeps your wife quiet, turn it on." Bob was supportive of Leah's journalism, encouraging her and giving her confidence, complimenting what she wrote, but also suggesting that she stop swearing since it cheapens what she writes. Haley remembers his calling for Eileen and nudging her to be ready so he could be ready on time. He was generally ready 30 minutes early. He even put out his breakfast at 5 p.m. the night before, just to be ready. And Bridget never lacked anything. Bob would always make his grandchildren feel seen and smart and recognized. And the going rate for finding the Passover afikomen got as high as $100. If they could argue with him, all the better. And if they finally proved him wrong, he'd smile and say, "So I'm wrong." His granddaughter Ariel wrote me a message after our family meeting on Sunday that I think sums it up very well, and I'm going to read that now. Most of my time with him was spent at large family gatherings, so my perspective may be biased. But I believe he was most proud of his children, their successes, and his grandchildren. He always supported us and showed his support by attending all graduations and giving generous gifts when he was able. And he seemed most happy and satisfied when we all gathered, even if we caused messes by building Home Alone-style traps in the basement, and even when it was becoming too challenging for him and Grandma to host in the way they used to. For a while, we gathered at 540 Carriage Way annually for Thanksgiving and 4th of July, but over time, Thanksgiving became the only not-to-be-missed occasion. He also supported the occasional occasions for our family to gather. Most memorable was the Thanksgiving in the Cayman Islands, my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary in Maine, my grandma's birthday at the Ritz and Four Seasons in Chicago, and my grandma's other birthday in rainy Wisconsin. Though we did not live close to them, these trips and times as a family made lasting memories. So whether we were gathering together somewhere exotic, a restaurant in Chicago, or their home in Deerfield, I know he valued these times. And I know he would be proud to see us all together again today. For many years, those Thanksgivings also included Bob's brother Lenny's family and their 6 children. It was definitely a full house. In Bob's later years, he would become more emotional at these family gatherings. He would make toasts about his wonderful family, how proud he was, how lucky he was to have the greatest family in the world, sometimes even crying. He appreciated all of his grandchildren who got his softer side. There are many more sides to who Bob was. His enjoyment of playing spider solitaire, his great sense of humor, his secret passion for clothing, his desire for order in the house as part of his meticulous and neat nature. Even after Hess Stevenson closed, Bob worked in some fashion until he was 85 years old, keeping his mind sharp with reading and thinking and word games. He would sometimes look back at old pictures of himself, like the picture on our booklet today, and he might say, "I was a good-looking guy." Bob and Eileen lived basically on their own until they were in their 90s. Even without much help until a stroke struck in 2018. In the end, they were never separated, even if it meant leaving behind the house that they loved. I want to sing a song of praise to all that remains here with us and does not leave and does not wander like the migrating birds. I want to sing to the trees that do not throw out their leaves and withstand the blaze of summer and the cold of winter, and to those people who do not throw out their memories and withstand more than those people who throw out everything. But above all, I want to sing a song of praise to lovers who remain together for joy and for pain and for joy, to make a home, to make children, now and in the other seasons. If you are comfortable standing, could I ask you to please stand for just a moment? We know that we must get used to this world without Bob, but we know that he is as close as our power to remember him. And so I ask you to respond to each line of this poem, which is printed on your booklet, but you don't need it, with the words, "We remember him." In the rising of the sun and in its going down, together, we remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember him. In the opening of the buds and in the warmth of summer, we remember him. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember him. So long as we live, Bob Seeley too shall live, for he is now a part of us as, together, we remember him. Let us pause for a moment of silent tribute in memory and in love of Robert Seeley. In the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Proverbs, we read, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. The memory of a good person is a blessing to us. Please be seated.
This does conclude the service here at the chapel. The family will be receiving